We are back, and we have Tyler versus SamuelTsao coming right up for you guys. And we cast Tyler yesterday. He took a loss versus Patra, and he seemed a little bit off his game, I feel like, yesterday. He seemed a little bit flustered about a few things. A couple of the things didn't go his way as well, like Patra's Zul'jin in the Hunter versus Mage matchups basically flipped the game around when Tyler was looking pretty far ahead. But he looked just a little bit flustered yesterday, so I hope everything's back to being calm again, because I do think Tyler's strength of play while he's under pressure is actually one of his strengths overall as a player.
I agree. I think we saw Tyler improve quite drastically last week from game 1 to game 2, as I highlighted yesterday, and I think yesterday his gameplay, I'm struggling to think back. I'm sure there were a couple of things he could have improved on, but Patra has had very, very strong starting hands all 3 games. I think she was putting the pressure on very, very early, which is where the mage struggles, and where we could see the mage struggling against the druid here as well, as I believe we're ready to take a look at SamuelTsao's deck. With this strong magnetization package that he's thrown in there in lieu of the Whispering Woods, it does mean, I think, that we could be seeing the kind of effect that Tyler was struggling to yesterday, again, with just throwing out minions on curve. Tyler's deck does not have that much to deal with it.
It doesn't, but Tyler's deck does run, I'll say, kind of quad freeze, which is very powerful, because Druid has no game versus freeze whatsoever, right? No. Like they can't, outside of getting your opponent low enough and then swiping for lethal, like there's nothing you can do. If your board is frozen, you either buff it more, give it death rattle, or pass, because there's no other way Druid can interact. So I think if Tyler hits the freezes and the Ray of Frost, the Frost Novas as well, of course, then it could look pretty good. But the combination is doing that whilst doing something and progressing the game plan. We can take a look at Tyler's deck now just to see exactly what he's got available. And this is the thing, right? I think we saw the opposite yesterday, where Tyler had a lot of spells and minions, but not the freezes. But if he'd had all the freezes, then he wouldn't have had the minions to win the game anyway. So it's kind of like a nice balancing act you need to do with this mage deck, I feel.
Yeah, it's really weird against the druid as well, because again, this is not the classic token druid that you may have come to know and hate over the past few weeks, since it entered its most recent form with the rotation away from Nourish and Ultimate Infestation, all that nonsense. It's changed from that deck with obviously the mech package. It doesn't have the Whispering Woods, and so the ability to go for something like Sea Giant Frost Nova is quite drastically diminished, because I believe that SamuelTsao will be trying as much as possible to make few minions that are big rather than many minions which are small.
Yeah, it's one thing that surprises me the most, because outside of, I would say, the rogue matchup, you don't really want to go wide in this meta at all. There's a lot of warrior, there's a mage with all the freezes now. So I wonder if Druid, maybe once the new expansion hits, I wonder if Druid moves more to just a mid-range style deck, because that's what I feel like it plays like right now. You make just a few minions, buff them up, give them sticky death rattles, and then you have Savage Roar, which is a very good card even when you've got 3 minions on the board. So I wonder if that's the way it will sort of lean post-expansion, or maybe even towards the end of this rotation.
I think it's a good theory. However, with the recent teaser that we got for the new expansion, it will clearly become Reno Druid, as will all decks in Hearthstone.
Of course.
They will all just become Reno, Reno blank, whatever it may be, because they will literally just reprint Reno Jackson.
Well, I was just going to say, what would be really funny is if you've not seen the little teaser video, go check out the Hearthstone Twitter, Play Hearthstone, and you can just see some music you may recognize.
A little sneak peek.
Teased. And what would be funny is if they just went,
here it is.
Jackson, it's 6 mana, like the exact same battle cry and everything would be absolutely funny, because I think half of the player base would enjoy it, and half would probably be upset. Yeah, I'll go with be upset as the PG version of what I was going to say. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be funny. But I do think that the playstyle, at least for this Druid, is more of a kind of just build a little bit on the board and play more of a mid-range push. Because, like you said, if you're playing Token Druid without Whispering Woods, is it really that much of a Token Druid, and is it just a deck with buffs and the Savage Roar to win the game?
And I think it's a very reasonable way to go down, because we've seen a pretty kind of a tug and pull between wanting to go for the the Whispering Wood style of play and the Curve style of play. I think this was most perfectly evinced in Ike's World Championships deck with the Heal Druid that he brought, where it felt like it was trying to do two things at once, and it kind of struggled to do either of them well because you wanted to curve out, but you also wanted to save cards. And I think, you know, he said afterwards that he would have put in like Predatory Instincts or something like that. Like he would have changed up the way it was played. But I think for SamuelTsao, I'm not convinced this is necessarily the way to do it. But I think the idea of trying to go for either all-in on a token style of play or more all-in with a curve style of play complemented with the buff cards, I think is one way or the other is generally the way he should be going.
So you're not rating the new Druid card that's coming out soon very highly? Do you know what it does?
Oh yeah, I made a meme about that. No, I do not rate that card very highly.
Most thing Derek makes memes about is either incredibly overpowered or not at all.
Yeah.
It's just extremes with you, Derek.
Well, I mean, yes, if you put the words Dr. Boom over a current meme format, you will gain 5 followers, as I've learned. It's a slow process. 5, It's a very slow process, but it gets there.
That's a lot of memes to get to any relevant following count.
Yes, it is. I fully agree.
Well, it works. I am going to take a stab in the dark and guess that we are waiting for Tyler to get ready, as it seems to be his forte over the past couple of weeks. I was not here last week, of course, as Hunter Race. What was it like casting with Hunter Race? Casting with the world champ?
Miserable.
That's not true. That's not really what you think. But that makes you the first person to cast with him, right? He's not cast beforehand?
I think
as in, like, post him being crowned world champion.
Oh, right. Well, he cast with Dan in Vegas for one of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
forget about that. Who cares?
Casper's a delight to cast with. I think it's difficult for players to transition. I think one of the things players don't realize is that fitting in every smart thing you want to say is the difficult bit, because players play very quickly. And Hunter Race was saying, you know, he had too much smart stuff to say, but I think he did a very good job.
I definitely enjoyed watching it. I'm not gonna lie about that one. Let's go into game number 1 as the players are ready, and SamuelTsao getting off to a very solid start. There is a bit of a, I'll say, kind of a whiff on turn 3, but he can just play Dreamway Guardians, of course. But this opening, not only is the Mecharoo tanky in terms of the death rattle, but that Fairy Dragon is just going to do damage. It's just a fact.
That is true. Wow. Ooh, there you go. That's that curve you were looking for. A Magnetized Snip Snap seems like a beautiful way to curve out here. But for Tyler, just the threat of dropping Mountain Giant on turn 4, I think may be enough to scare SamuelTsao into trading, which massively slows down his game. Like, obviously Tyler does not have the Conjurer's Calling to go with it, but this hand for Tyler is a hand that could take this match, even with the early onslaught of damage he's taking.
Yeah, one thing you need to learn about Mage, if you've somehow not learnt it by now, is they can just swing twice and win, and all they need to do is play a minion, freeze the board, and then go with Conjurer's Calling. And it's basically the Mage can put you on 2-turn lethal at almost any point in the mid to late game, and that's something you do have to watch out for.
Tyler going with Frostbolt Ray of Frost here, which is not bad because it still leaves the ability for Evocation Giant should he wish to go for that on the following turn. I was kind of looking, to be honest, at Lunar Coin Ray of Frost, because it would have demanded an answer, which means that just playing with freezing the mech, which means that replicating Menace and Explosionator would not be playable if he wants to kill the Luna.
Right.
And I believe it would still have given the ability for Evocation into Mountain Giant on the following turn. So, I mean, it obviously had weaknesses, because if there was a board buff card, like Power of the Wild or Blessing of Ancients, or even just a swipe, Tyler would have been punished there. But I don't know, I feel like it could have been a decent way to force SamuelTsao to play off curve.
That pickup is very important.
That pickup is very good,
because
this is
one of the issues is you can't play a Giant that's already dead, right? That you could play the Giant and then it would just insta-die to the board, and then and SamuelTsao can develop on top of that. You know what I've realized I don't like about that's been bugging me about this Druid list? There's no Sea Giants. And that bothers me every time I don't see it in Druid.
Oh, really?
Because I feel like the amount of, especially with the mech death rattles, the amount of tokens you get, like, just play a Sea Giant.
Right, I mean, I think it's the classic thinking with Druid, though, is that they have access to wide board buffs, which Rogue and Mage don't. So the payoff for having a wide board is you kill your opponent. You don't need to develop on top of that because you Savage Roar or you Blessing of Ancients. Like, I think even in Rogue, Sea Giant can be viewed as a win more card. I think in Druid, Sea Giant a lot of the time would just be a win more card.
Okay, interesting.
It's not. It wouldn't be bad. I don't think it would be that bad.
No, you said it's trash. It's fine. Maybe I have a natural preference, but I always just consider what Sea Giant would cost now, this turn, for example, and then you're like, well, obviously that would be good. But you see turns like this all the time because a lot of boards, maybe especially in this matchup, go wide, right? And I think it's very, very useful in this matchup specifically.
I agree. I base all my opinions off of literally only what I can see in the exact instance that I formed them.
Yeah, same. Glad we agree. Yeah, getting back to the cards SamuelTsao actually does have available to him. This space is lacking. Is that better than
Summoning?
I was just going to ask, is that always wrong placement?
Yes, I mean,
I think it is, right?
He spent 1 mana to, like, he only ended up with a 2-drop over just having another 1/1, which I guess is fair enough to get a little bit of extra pressure, and I don't hate that play, actually.
And if he's trading anyway, he wouldn't have the space, right?
Yes, yeah.
So now Tyler, and this is the point, right? Tyler's got enough health to not just die from swipes, and he can freeze, and then maybe he can develop next turn and go wide. He's looking for, I think, 1 more freeze, though. He needs something, because this Soul of the Forest is kind of weird versus Mage, right? Soul of the Forest, it kind of does nothing. Because Mage doesn't often clear a board
Tyler's
like this.
never clearing this board.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Tyler needs Evocation or Frost Nova.
And none of those.
It's so close, man, because he needs to be able to play Giant Conjurer's Calling, and he's just 1 mana off.
I told him.
Blue Gill Warrior is definitely one of the better options that he could find. He just needs to pray that he's not dead in this instance.
Makes the only trade that doesn't buff the board state for SamuelTsao.
Yeah, he can only freeze 1 minion as well.
That's just Kane.
And he literally just gives it up. Was he dead?
I think the problem was, if he freezes stuff, he'll never play a Giant that game. And if he can't play a Giant Conjuring, he doesn't win.
Really? But he had, if he got...
I mean, the problem was the game ended very quickly then, so I wasn't 100% sure on board state and each player's hand, of course, but...
I think he was dead to a single buff card, but if SamuelTsao didn't have that and he'd drawn Evocation off the top, he could have gone for the Giant into Conjurer's Calling. Like...
Well, after doing that turn?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Because I don't know if you could freeze and do it all, because
you'd
you'd lose the Ray of Frost, for example, which is -1 card, and so on.
Could have top decked Arcane Intellect into Sea Giant and Frost Nova, like, and it might achieve enough. Like, I'm struggling to think there, but if he wasn't dead, he shouldn't have conceded, right? Maybe he just knew he was dead. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and look at that one a little bit later, or maybe now, because we're going to step away as we set up game number 2. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Dalaran will be ours! Once we land, you know what to do! No we don't. You didn't tell us to play it. I didn't think I had to. It's perfectly obvious. Bank! I am to be robbing the bank! I take henchmen for vault smashing and shiny stealing! Plan is obvious! It's a start, yes, but...
You won't get a single coin unless you take care of the city's guards. Let's rip open Violet Hole and unleash the prisoners on the city. That'll keep the guards busy.
Certainly, but that's not...
No! First, we must sow chaos in the streets.
I got rockets. Anyone need rockets? Try to see the big picture.
Shiny, shiny, shiny. We have to break their will before we can loot, you fools.
Please, everyone, please.
Let's strap some rockets to the city.
Oh, big candle. And then we just take the whole shebang wherever we want. Yes! Finally, you're exactly right.
Seriously?
That's dumb.
Ah, weak candle.
Just wait till second gear kicks in.
Yes! It's just like I said. We're going to take Dalaran for all that it's got. It's a genius plan. It's simple. It should have been obvious. And absolutely nothing will go wrong.
So, genius. How do we land?
You may have blinked and missed it, but that was game number 1 that we just had between Tyler and SamuelTsao, and we have been like, attacking the Druid a little bit overall, but I guess those are the games where it just happens, right? You just get the minions on board on curve. It was a fantastic curve from SamuelTsao, and he got the job done. He's sticking on his deck. Let's take a look at Tyler's change as he has moved over to his tertiary deck, which he's allowed to do in the specialist format.
Yes, things get much more amenable, I think, for him here, especially with the double halftime scavenger. I think Ziliax could help, but generally against the Druid, it's not health that you're afraid of, it's just losing board control. And I think the halftime scavenger does a beautiful job of both killing off one of those medium-sized mechs to stop any magnetization, and also just being a target for Conjurer's Calling. It's such an underrated facet of the card. The fact that you can go Scavenger on 4 into Khadgar Conjurer's Calling on 5 just wins the game on the spot.
Yeah, we even heard to the extent that when we asked Patra about why she kept a Deadly Shot, against this exact deck she faced Tyler yesterday, she was like, oh yeah, well I know he plays halftime scavenger and that would be a real problem if he landed it. And I wanted to get rid of it. I was like, oh well, that's a lot of respect for that card. And also, just a shout out to the +1 Sea Giant, which makes 2 in the deck total, as the Sea Giants in this matchup, I feel, make it much more likely to give Tyler the ability to do the mage counter attack than a Mountain Giant would. We saw in the last game, juggling, can I and should I play a Mountain Giant? If I don't, the more I stall the board, the less ability I have to play the Mountain Giant because of the way the mana works with that card. Whereas the Sea Giant just gets reduced based on the minions on board, and guess what? Druid puts minions on board.
It was such an interesting game at the start.
Derek's mind is blown.
Well, no, I'm just trying to think what happened. Like, Tyler just was doing decent stuff, and he just died. Like, he had the hand at the start that could have gone the distance, but he just didn't find the time to play the Giants.
I think we definitely, after the show, need to go back and watch just at least the last couple of turns just to see what happened. And because I think the ending was very sudden, so I was just like, I can't even remember the board state exactly now, because Tyler made like half a turn and then conceded. So I didn't know what mana was left, what cards were left, but because I'm a fantastic caster, of course, I keep an eye on all these things. But with this one, I do feel like Tyler's got a much better chance, just because I feel like these techs are so good versus Druid. I think they're just very, very solid, and even the halftime scavenger, yes, it's not the ultimate anti-Druid card, of course, but as we mentioned yesterday, it fills a gap on that turn 4, where Mage doesn't really have a lot to do outside of a Sandbinder if you play it. But now there's something that Tyler can curve out with himself, and if you can keep up with the Druid, your stuff ends up being bigger than theirs, so you can actually just take over and one freeze, and then the Mage wins.
Oh, if he did want to keep up in terms of board state early on, though, he is going to have his work cut out for him, with SamuelTsao getting in another pretty nutty hand here.
Yeah, and this match is a big deal for Tyler. He lost yesterday, going to 6-5. If he loses again, he goes to 6-6. And Tyler is in contention for a top 3 spot, which, in case you don't know, puts the top 3 from each division go into a playoff in the last week of Grandmasters, and then the winner gets a spot at the global finals to effectively become, or have a chance of becoming, the world champion. So it's a big deal, and SamuelTsao might be, the player to snatch that away from him a little bit if he beats Tyler now.
I also love SamuelTsao's turn 1 play. I think it was not necessarily so obvious, especially because he had 2 1-drops in hand. But I think both the 1-drops had very, very real weaknesses. The Acorn Bearer obviously just gets pinged on turn 2, which Tyler would generally be very happy with. And the Crystallizer just dies to a Sorcerer's Apprentice. It gets value traded, or you'd have to hero power it down.
Yeah, and the hero power is the scary bit, right?
Exactly. And this play, I think, it just works beautifully around what Tyler could do. The Fairy Dragon trades with the Apprentice, which is fine for SamuelTsao, and he follows up with a double 1-drop afterwards, at which point all weaknesses of playing them on turn 1 are negated.
Yeah, and what you described then was worst case scenario. Hey, look at not worst case scenario. All the minions are on the board and punching Tyler in the face right now. And one thing as well about Acorn Bearer on 1, it is actually less powerful in this build than it has been in the past, because you're not running Whispering Woods.
True.
So it means that the extra minions you get in hand do not buff another card to create more tokens. It's just 2 more 1/1s in hand that you can play and buff easily later, so it's still good, but not as good as just, you just throw it down on 1, and then by the time you get to turn 4, you've got a much more powerful turn. And now, it's off curve, but that Power of the Wild looks glorious to me, Derek.
It does look really tempting. I mean, I imagine that's probably what he's going to go for because, again, as I talked about at the start, he does not want to go too wide on the board. That's when things can possibly go wrong.
Now there's a second Sea Giant in Tyler's deck. This is really nice play from SamuelTsao, actually. I feel like already, yes, he's had a great hand, but when you've got a great hand, you play well on top of that, and that's what gets you consistent wins.
I mean, there were so many different ways to sequence his first few turns there, and in my opinion, he found the best one.
And look, Tyler even got a Sea Giant as well, so SamuelTsao could have strolled straight into Tyler, maybe Ray of Frost, Sea Giant, and then you're afraid a little bit, and then you one Frost Nova and a Conjurer's Calling away from just losing the game.
No mechs on board, which is a little bit annoying for old Sammy T, but he has still this tremendous amount of pressure on board that he can keep pushing face with.
I wonder the consideration of playing the Cable Rat just to see what, because the Lackey might alter the game in certain ways. If you can discover a spell, well, that spell might just be a board buff or a Savage Roar to win the game.
That's fair. I think you can probably do that next turn though, right? Because there's nothing for 1 mana that I think he would like. There's no board buffs for 1 mana. Mark of the Lotus does not exist anymore.
True.
Sadly.
Sadly? I was never a big fan of Token Druid, to be fair, so for me it's a bonus.
I liked it back in the day.
And I guess with Replicating Menace, the weakness is negated by you being okay if your opponent spends 2 mana next turn pinging something that creates tokens.
And of course, everything else goes face.
If Replicating Menace drops 3, right?
Yes.
So it would make it 2 cheap. So you can ping Sea Giant trade, but it looks like he would be very dead if he did that, so...
Yeah. Can't go. Oh, it's just like 1 off from the Giant Frost Nova, which is pretty devastating.
Just gonna have to make do with Ray of Frost. But look, it's Fairy Dragon. What a boss lately. Like, whoever put Fairy Dragon in lists recently first, I don't know exactly who you are. I cannot know that. But high five, because that is just good.
I think it might have been Jay Alexander in the Rogue. I think. I mean, it's been floating around, obviously, in decks previously, but I think in this cycle, I think it might have been him.
Very
Apologies
solid.
if not. Yeah, I mean, it's the nuts versus Mage. Look at this. Tyler could have done nothing against it.
And it's also decent versus other classes as well, right? Versus Rogue, it negates Backstab.
And even though Tyler could very well have just been expecting to die on the spot to a Savage Roar, he gets the good news. He's alive. And now just about. But, I mean, that's often all Mage needs, right? It's not even like he's going down to the range of dying to a swipe off the top on the following turn. He can start to capitalize on this with a Frost Nova. Yeah,
the problem right now is the Nova's fantastic. The something else next turn is not so fantastic. You probably...
Well, I mean, if he gets Conjurer's Calling off the top, he could push face, Frost Nova, Conjurer's Calling, double Deathwings.
Right, if he gets the best card possible from the top,
yes,
he can win. Of course, right. I will never debate that. If he doesn't,
yes,
his turn could suck. And if you just Nova hit for 8 and effectively pass, then that's still a huge problem, is my point overall. There needs to be a slightly bit more from Tyler as follow-up.
I think Tyler's behind, but not by that much, I would actually argue. Like, being able to go Arcane Intellect on this turn gets him a lot closer to drawing to the cards he needs.
That's also a good draw.
Yes.
Holy moly. Okay. Okay.
Has it got to be another Arcane Intellect? Like, he could just go for... He has Research Project. I mean, I guess he just has to hard draw for this Frost Nova.
Yeah. And or he has to just... Yeah, he has to dig for the Conjurers as well, right? Because even with another Nova, he is too far away, I think.
Well, actually, no, I mean, if he has Frost Nova, he has 2-turn lethal, right? Like, he just wins.
Oh, sure, with pings, yeah.
Which means he just has to dig for it right now.
This game becomes very straightforward. And this is what we're saying about how linear Druid is. If this is double swipe, though.
Oh, Conjurer's Calling. You can go for the Mana Cyclone to generate it. This is a lot of cards he gets as well. Or does he ever go for the Mountain Giant? He can go Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Calling?
Go for taunts? That can't be safer,
It's probably
right?
not worth it.
It can't be safer. If you miss, you just die instantly.
What's he thinking about? Surely he should have gone Cyclone first, right?
Wait, did he need to play that Sea Giant? I don't think he needed to play the Sea Giant, right?
Well, it was free.
Right, but it's -1 space, so if he gets the big bagged Archmage, can he still summon a 6-drop?
Oh, okay. Yes, he can. but that's his only
Okay.
shot now.
Time runs out on me.
But with Ice Barrier, he goes up by 8, which is up to 14.
Move card, I can't see what it is. Oh! Okay, the trade makes him have the space. Another taunt.
And
Oh,
that
Savage Roar.
that's going to close out the game.
And he even has Soul the Forest to check for the counter spell.
So close to a comeback there for Tyler. He had so many draws there for a Frost Nova and a Generation as well.
Look at his board.
Should he have gone for the Giant into... Like, was it more likely that he goes... Like, it's a 25% chance that he gets double Grave Horror off of Giant Conjurer's Calling. Is that less or more likely than generating a board freeze off of the Mana Cyclone? Or does he even survive if he gets the double Grave
yeah, I was
Horror?
going to say the problem... my instant worry, as SamuelTsao does take the win, of course, that's why we're just talking about stuff. He'd already won. Congratulations, SamuelTsao. But my worry with that is... I didn't do the maths, but 2 8-health taunts often does not do the job when your opponent needs to do like 6 extra damage on top of that, especially with drawing so many cards. So I'm not sure on that one, but there you go. SamuelTsao takes a win with the Druid, and very, very quick. And although it looked just overpowering, great draws, so on and so on, I think SamuelTsao played it very well.
I agree.
I think the early game there was just the Fairy Dragon into the double 1-drop, and then just pushing onto the board, the buffs at the right time as well, the Power of the Wild off curve. Ticked all the boxes for me.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And, you know, while we have been having a go at the Druid, I think it's fair to say we kind of have egg on our face now because, again, it's small sample size. We can't judge whether it's good or bad just on 4 games. But SamuelTsao's gone 1-1 both weeks now that he's brought this, or the last 2 weeks that he's brought this token Druid. And if he is trying to target these mages, he's doing a decent job of it, I would say.
It's definitely working, isn't it? And you know, with the small sample size, I have no doubts that any brings to Grandmasters have been at least decent in practice, right? Because it defies logic. You practice the deck, it does badly, okay, I'll submit it, right? Like, that just doesn't make sense, does it? So I imagine everything's gone at least decent in practice based on the reads that they have as well for what they want to bring in a given week. So yeah, I think the Druid can get there. I just don't know if it gets there often enough to be a consistent bring to Grandmasters.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of the players have come to the realization to, which is even with decks like Nomi Priest, which I believe Tice has brought in the European region this week, to not bring one of the 3, arguably 4 top classes of Rogue, Mage, Warrior, arguably Hunter, you have to have a very, very good reason, I would say. I don't think that Druid does counter Mage very well, and so therefore I'm not convinced that it is a good enough reason. But at the very least, it makes you less predictable if you're not bringing one of the main 3. So even if you're not countering very well, you're leaving yourself less susceptible to being countered yourself.
Yes.
Which is kind of an interesting dynamic. Nomi Priest is an entirely different kettle of fish. I've got to be honest, I am wildly confused as to why you would bring Nomi Priest at this point in Grandmasters.
Long conversations with Purple about that one, as he seems to be back on that wagon.
Purple doesn't count. Purple can win with anything. Like, Purple on ladder it's cheating. He's too good at Hearthstone.
It is weird, isn't it? I think a lot of the times in the past I've seen him tweet decks, I'm like, oh, it's just like he just wanted to ladder some random deck one day.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, top 10. I'm like, what?
Well, the thing is, the list he tweeted out with Nomi Priest, he only got like rank 87 or something, I think. For Purple, that's uber dumpster. That's like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Normally, he
rank.
just posts random lists. It's like, oh yeah, got top 10 today. And you're just like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
This is just a random set of cards. But it's Purple, so he makes it work. Seems to be his speciality at least. But yeah, we do have plenty more matches coming up today, of course. We have Blitzchung versus Glory. So speaking of being predictable, Blitzchung spent a long time of GM playing Hunter specifically, and he has brought the Bomb Warrior this time, and seems to be pretty happy with it based on his performance yesterday. But we're just going to go to a quick break, and we're going to see how he does today, because he's going up against Glory next. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.